So it's not only the philosophy of, when we are talking about Thales, Anaximander, we had a talk on Anaximander, a lecture on Anaximenes and Anaximander, and we see the lecture, we see that this very school created the great philosopher like this Heraclitus. He was from Ephesus, the place. This place is now Ephesus. It's in Turkey now, modern Turkey. And Turkey, as you see, Asia Minor, it was exactly the intrusion on the western part of the Anatolia. So people for a long would speak the language of the Greeks there in this part. So this, I would say that it was more like Asia than a Greek. But for historians, I don't know what they have done with the history. And when they write the history of these philosophers, they never talk that. I think the whole philosophy of philosophers, they have somehow, somewhere borrowed the philosophy of prophets as well, because this was the land of prophets, Jordan, Egypt, Arab, and the land of the Abraham, land of Yusuf, land of Israel, land of Jesus, everything. This was the land of the prophet, and we see that they never talked about this. They would talk about the philosophy of Indian philosophy, which is far away from this very part, but they would not discuss about the part they have been just influenced with. As we see in Thales' time, he would just go and learn from the Egyptians, and where from Egyptians did learn? They did learn from the prophets. They did learn everything from the prophets. So we have always taken account of the prophets in one side, that they were only the people who had revelation from the God, and besides that, they have never contributed. They have contributed in science, in mathematics, in geometry, but we have our historians. They have never talked about this. So everything what was there was the knowledge of the prophets. And Greeks, they had the influence of this land as well. So today we are just telling about the Heraclitus. He was born in 540, and some say 535 or 540, are right here, 535 or 540, and up to 580. So exactly he lives 80 years. He lives the life of a lonely person, people say. So we have two great stories, and the great official biographers, I will talk of them as well. Diogenes Laertius was a great biographer of the pre-Socratic philosophy. So I write here, some people may pronounce it as Diogenes, the way they pronounce it. So this is Diogenes, and this is Laertius, Diogenes Laertius. He was in AC after Christ, after Isa alayhi salam, he was after that, and he was from the background of Hellenistic philosophy in that period, around Hellenistic period, that had a great influence on whole history of the philosophy. So some of the stories, I would write first that what exactly was the belief of the first statement, I would say, but it would be discussed in second lecture. The first philosophical statement was this, that he was against the philosophy of Anaximander, against the philosophy of Pythagoras. So Pythagoras' philosophy, what would say Heraclitus? He would say that the Anaximander and Pythagoras, though they were great learners and great learned ones, but they had no understanding. The statement like that, they had no understanding. No understanding. Who had no understanding? The previous philosophers. Why they had no understanding? Let's see what exactly was the belief of our previous philosophers, and then what was the philosophy of our Heraclitus. So not deeply but superficially, because in other lectures as well. Thales, he would believe that everything is made of water, everything is created from water, water is responsible for it. And again now, what was the belief of this Anaximander, who was somehow, some people say, some scholars, some biographers say that he was a student of Thales, let it be, whatever, that he had believed that it's Epiron, that is the beginning of everything. What was that? That was never discussed a lot because we don't have material available written by those philosophers. And we know that it was a number system developed by what we call that Pythagoras, that he believes in numbers, and that was too denied everything in a very strategic manner by Heraclitus. And Heraclitus said that they had no understanding. This is not only the statement against the philosophers like them, but against Homer as well. About Homer, who is having had a great influence on the mythology of Greeks. If you have had the history of philosophy, it was only the reaction of the philosophers against the created myths by the Homer, the stories of the Homer, goddesses, whatever was there. And he said that they were worthy to be beaten. The Homer was worthy to be beaten, so he did go against his whole understanding that he was an insane person. He was an insane person. So like Buddha, he did renounce. It is said that he was the prince, he was the son of a king. Son of a king. So his father was Heracon. His father was roughly, some people say that his father was the king and he was the prince, but he did leave his, what we say that, he did leave his, he was to be the king, next king, but he did leave it for his brother. So he renounced the world, in his own way become a wanderer. As Diogenes, he says that he was a wondrous person, and he used the word wondrous. He used the word wondrous. And when Plato makes the analysis of this, and he says that when wondrous, and this was the beginning of the philosophy, as the Socrates as well. So there was nothing spatial which was left, which was written, which was left for the people of the era. They could have analyzed, they could have gone for the analysis of the works of this great philosopher Heraclitus, who said that you cannot step twice in the same river. That we will discuss in our next lecture. The whole lecture will be on that statement. And Heraclitus is also called as the dark philosopher, or the weeping philosopher, or the weeping philosopher, or sometimes as a riddled philosopher. Why is called a dark philosopher? Why the weeping philosopher, and why the riddled philosopher? There are three different stories related to this great philosopher. The first, the dark philosopher, because he would go against the philosophy of the previous philosophy of the pre-Socratian philosophers, which were before him. Not only this, he had a great aversion, he had a great enmity with the thought of Parmenides. Parmenides was a great Italian philosopher. So, these thoughts, that means a dark philosopher, a philosopher with riddles, and a philosopher with weeping. Why weeping? He would be saying that there should be social harmony in the society. The first concept of social harmony was given by Heraclitus the greatly. That means he was also a social philosopher. He had a great thought about the society. Social philosopher, not only to find the reality of his being, to know thyself, like Thales says, but he would say that social harmony should be there. And he was very much concerned about the people, why people are sleeping, why people are not awakened, that they would go and find the reality. So they are in the dreams, they are sleeping. The reality is something different and they should go. So he says that there are the opposites, the theory of opposites, which we'll discuss in the next lecture, but a brief account what exactly is that. He says that there is evil force and good force in everything. Or particularly we call the human being, there's a good force. When these two forces are in contrast, they are just fighting with each other. That these two forces make the great person. So when you say that let's go for the good only, he said that you're just going towards the dreamy side. You're just not fighting with the evil. You just go and find the answer. Maybe you have to fight with this. Because his great statement is that war is the father of everything. So this is not a war that's in the battlefield. War is the father of everything. So we'll discuss it in our lectures also. So it's a conflict, it's a strife, what Heraclitus says, strife, the conflict within and outside the universe. So the statement like that this universe, when he goes against the philosophy of Parmenides, and he's referred to be as the dark philosopher as well. And Parmenides says that it's impossible that we will have something from nothing. So this was a philosophy beyond his reach that he would believe like this. He says that everything is conserved in this universe in one or another form, which later science proved it, that in what we call that conservation of energy and mass. That's why sometimes I say that if you are not good at basic science, mathematics, geometry and everything, you should not hand in philosophy. You should first read it and then you will understand the basic concepts of it. What he says that everything should be conserved. So from the very beginning, there was something. That something was, maybe it would have been changed, but it has never vanished from here. So it would not be said that it's gone to nothing there. So nothing is not a state, everything. Parmenides, that's why he said that the universe is static, which we have discussed in our lecture. The way he says the universe is static, I will say that. He says that everything is predestined. Everything is predestined here. Everything has been written here. What he says that we are bound in the laws of nature. So the first natural philosopher, Thales, then Anaximander, now Heraclitus, and also Parmenides, he says that if we go beyond the reach of this universe, and you will look towards this, you will look towards this, and when you look towards this, you will see that everything is predestined there. You will understand everything there. It's a huge mass, not a dynamic mass. But Heraclitus says that this universe is in dynamic form. This is the dynamic universe, as his famous statement that everything is in flux. We call that Heraclitus flux. We call that statement as Heraclitus flux. Heraclitus flux. So he was the beginner of the philosophy of the change. That change is the reality. As the famous Arabian saying is that La yamanul insan wa yawdi'u zaman. That means with everything, with the change of time, there is everything changes. La yamanul insan, that means man changes with the passage of time. So there is a change is the reality, but we should have the great this comparison between the change which is propounded, which is propagated by the pragmatists like John Davy and others. That is something a bit, I will not say exactly the change what he's talking about, because he is a metaphysicist. He's not totally that he would say that he's an atheist. No, he's not like that. So we are talking today about Heraclitus. Nothing is there, not even any book which he wrote that would be available to us, but only some fragments. What we call that fragments, these fragments are their epigrams. We call such fragments like epigrams, something which he wrote on the stones. And some people say that when it was the time of Socrates or the time of Plato, there were some people, they called themselves as Heraclitans. They did make these thoughts himself. So we would always believe that whatever is related to Heraclitus' riddles, his riddles are very difficult to understand. And that's why he's called as riddle philosopher. So everything what's related to, what's linked to Heraclitus, we'll discuss that. Some theorists don't believe that everything is related to him. He has said everything. It's only the blame linked to the Heraclitus. Let me see the greatest influence. Let me rub it first. I'll rub it first and then I'll just come to more thoughts. So we'll discuss now that what exactly they believe that Heraclitus was influenced by whom. Today we are just dealing with the beginning, the introduction of the philosopher like Heraclitus, and even next lectures we'll just be dealing with his great philosophy of flux, the theory of opposites, the dynamic universe, the dreamland, the people in dreams. We'll be discussing on those, and the theory of logos, what he discusses. And Diogenes, he says, because he took the material from Sotion. So who was this Sotion? He was the philosopher. He was at the Hellenistic time. He did write the philosophy which became the source from Diogenes. source, because Diogenes is responsible for giving the information about the pre-Socratean philosophers, the great philosophers, but the source was Sotion, who was at the time of Hellenistic period after the death of Alexander. So we call that he was also in Alexandria. So this was the source of knowledge, Sotion, for the Diogenes. He wrote about them. What they believed, as they write, that some of the scholars believe that the thoughts which were linked to Heraclitus, those thoughts were generated from two great philosophies. Those were the thoughts of these two great philosophies. One is called Epicureanism, and another is the philosophy which was also generated at the time of this Hellenistic period, what we call also Hellenistic philosophy or Hellenistic period. This period was started somewhere 3rd century BC, somewhere 3rd century BC. 3rd century BC. So two great philosophers, one is Epicureanism and one is Stoicism. Stoicism. And who began the philosophy of Epicureanism? It was Epicurus. It was Epicurus. And it was a system of philosophical thought, which was started by Epicurus. And who was Epicurus? He was influenced by Democritus. So we are making the link between these philosophers and the philosophy of the Heraclitus. So we also called him as the atomic materialist. Like Democritus, he would believe that everything is made of atoms. Atomic materialist. So this very philosophy was originated from somewhere 3rd century BC. Now another philosophy, as you know, that was Stoicism. This was also in the period of Hellenistic period, or what we call Hellenistic philosophy, and it was founded by, and it was originated by the great philosopher like Zeno. Yeah, of course, Zeno. So he was from the Steam, Zeno. So the influence. So they say that this was the great influence of actually these two Hellenistic philosophies. They have written the accounts of others, and somehow, somewhere, also the Heracliteans, they also linked some thoughts with the Heraclitus. Otherwise, we don't have anything which is survived there, which could be of the interest of the research. What did he say? So, the two great, one is Epicureanism, one is this. So we'll sideline this, will come again there. So it was a link in between this. What Diogenes says also, that he participated in the 69th Olympiad. Who participated? It was this philosopher Heraclitus. What is Olympiad? Olympiad was kept the duration of 4 years. And this duration of 4 years, the games were played, and it's said that he took place also. Some people rejected, but also Diogenes, he says that he was fond of the temple of Artemis. He was fond of the temple of Artemis. Who? And herein you will see the greatest thought, which also we see in Republic, that about the politics, about the dirty politics, about the democracy we had how in in Greek that time. He says somebody would come and say that you are the son of a king, you are the prince, so you are playing here. He was fond of, Diogenes says, he was fond of the game of knucklebones. Knucklebones. Heraclitus. Knucklebones. Knucklebones, the game that it was first of the boons. You will just throw boons in the air, and then you will catch the boons from the very back. So first you will just throw one somewhere. There were 5 to 10 boons which were selected for this game. Later it was modified up to 6 these boons. Then it was converted into metallic form, these boons, and now we have plastic. These plastic balls or something like this. When you throw the balls in the air and then you catch those balls with the hand, having the great practice of your hands, that game was found of. He was fond of that game. Who's Heraclitus? Somebody would come and he would just say the term like politia was this politia was Poneria, or maybe whatever way you pronounce it. I try my best to give the best of the pronunciation. Politia is Ponera. So what does he mean by it? He says somehow, somewhere, perhaps that politics is a dirty game. He doesn't like it. So that's why he became the wanderer. And people say that he lived then the years in the mountains in order to search the truth, like the Buddha did say. Buddha did go in order to search the remedy against the sufferings. Same did happen to Heraclitus, and he did go and would find the answer for his restlessness and why people are in dreams. So he believed in the theory of opposites. That means theory of opposites. So what are these opposites? So rough idea I will give here. Later we'll discuss a separate lecture we'll have on opposites, that exactly what we have, the binary opposite system in structuralism, as it's propounded by Ferdinand de Saussure. Somehow, somewhere like that, we had how this very theory of opposites. But he says that this is the same one. If there are no opposites there, then it would be imbalanced. So the balance of this dynamic universe is there. There's a balance, but it's not in a static form. So two things he says here. What he says, that the whole universe is in dynamic form, that dynamism is balanced by the opposites. So there is opposite force also available. So this is also by this. Another is theory of logos. Theory of logos, which will also be discussed, theory of logos. So what is exactly the theory of logos? And theory of logos is that something is there which connects this whole structure, and he calls it an organic structure. Who calls it an organic structure? That this structure is reasonably created. There is a rationalism in it. There is a reason behind this whole structure. This whole structure is made in such a way that everything is fit in it. So he talks about the whole structure, not about the parts, because they would just be, if you just take the part away from it, and then it would create a problem. So if there is a problem in the structure, you have to repair the structure in order to make it again the structure. So I think with this influence, John Locke was able to form the structure of the ship. When he says that, yes, he was somewhere influenced with Heraclitus, this system of the whole structure is in the intellectual form, in the rational form, in that very grand structure, when it's full, there is no defect in it, but there is dynamism in it, which was rejected by Parmenides. He said that it's a static form. And John Locke says that if there is a ship, and you have something goes bad in the ship, and then you repair the ship, and again you repair the ship, again you repair the ship. One day you reach to the stage where you see the material which was used before in the beginning to make this ship, now the whole material is replaced because of the repairment. Now this is the same ship, but the whole repairment is there. He believes in like this, and some great philosophers were influenced by Heraclitus, like Nietzsche. He was influenced a lot, and we'll discuss also Nietzsche and this Heraclitus, and also the Plato, Socrates, because Socrates says that when Euphrates, he gave the book, it is said that illegally he gave the book to Socrates, and Socrates read the book, and he said, I understood a lot from the book, but something I did not understand, because there is the need of something which he did not understand. He knows that also, and there's a need of a diver who goes to the bottom and thinks about that, what exactly he was saying. So we'll discuss this theory of opposites in our coming lecture. Also, there is one more thing which we need to have, that's theory of social harmony. So which we discussed before a bit, like that there needs a need of social harmony, because he would take part in social activities first. Later he was against the people, because people were not striving, people were not struggling in order to find the reality. As Strabo is also one of the historians. Strabo, he was in 64th BC. Strabo, he says in his writings that there was one of the founder of this dynasty who had come from the Ionian, this part, from this Anatolia part, and he was perhaps the king here, and from that very dynasty was this Heraclitus, and he was Androclus. And their family would take part greatly in the social activities, and that's why they were given the charge of being the supervisors, because that time the kings and dukes of small parts, small lands, those were supervising the games and all those activities. In Hellenistic period, it was roughly the period of science, games. People would take part in activities, in different environmental activities, in studies, in mathematics and geometry. All these things were happening, and you had to have a supervisor there. That was Androclus, the founder. He would just shift to this, and then Ephesus, they settled there. And then it was Heraclius. Also, we'll just deal about that. Also, the greatest statement that everything is in flux, we'll have a lecture on that, on binary opposed, the theory of logos, and theory of logos, also the Hellenistic influence, and what exactly, something more about Hellenistic period, and what was related to this Heraclitus. And also, you cannot step twice in the same river. That means that the reality is the change. Would have a lecture on that. So, dear students, in order to get more videos free of cost, so you need to subscribe our videos. You get a subscription note there. When you watch our YouTube videos, you subscribe and get free of cost. So, see you in our next lecture. Till then, goodbye. But I would say that when we say about one more point, we'll have a lecture on that also, because we have had some more lectures on this. That is, there is no beginning and no end. Also, it's propounded by Heraclitus. And when he says, when we draw the circle, in a circle, when we go around the circle, and you have to find a one point there, there is not any original point where you can say that this is the beginning. So see you in our next lecture. Till then, goodbye.